Oh boy, I can't wait to win this race with my superior pace, great strategy, and bravery in traffic and around other cars. Nice, we won! Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
Oh my God, it actually worked. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 544 of Motorsport 101, here to celebrate the end of the 2024 IndyCar Series, the final race of the year at Nashville Superspeedway. It has happened, it is done, and we can finally say for the first time, Colton Herta is an oval race winner. It happened.
It's about damn time.
We don't have to meme it anymore. Like, Colton Herta just went out and did the thing and won. We love to see it. There was also a small matter of a title decided that ended up not really being a thing anymore. Whoops. That's a shame. But hey, that happened. And I wish you could watch this podcast taping right now, because a certain Mr. Cameron Buckley has broken out his Alex Palou jersey as we speak, while lifting his signed Alex Palou die-cast to the sky to celebrate his third Astor Cup championship in 4 years.
He is the 15-year NHL vet that has never won a championship, and he's just been handed the Stanley Cup as the first person to get it. It's just yeah!
On a deep personal level, I told you so.
I told you so even before then.
This Super Formula kid is pretty good, huh?
I was invested in him when he was with Super Formula Lights, with a European F3 season in between.
I got invested in him when he won a Super Formula race while underwater.
He's good.
Oh,
it
feels good.
Really good. There are not many three-time IndyCar Series champions. I mean, we were guaranteed one either way, unless, Scott McLaughlin's best attempts came true. But Alex Palou's not part of elite company.
Also, some breaking news that has come out from our friend Kira in our Discord chat in the time since we hit the record button. Channel 4 in Indianapolis is reporting that the FBI is doing an investigation at Rahal Letterman Lanigan HQ.
Are you serious?
Deadly.
Are they investigating how bad the oval setup was? Been that way for a few years.
CBS 4 and Fox 59 FBI officials confirmed Wednesday afternoon that agents were at RLL Racing headquarters in Zionsville for an active investigation. The FBI said in a statement there was no threat to the public. No other information was provided. It's still a work in progress. Probably by the time we finish talking about the big machine Music City Grand Prix at Nashville Superspeedway, that's not a Grand Prix because it's not taking place at its straight course. It's taken place already all the way out in the boonies.
Yeah, I love that during the race itself, they came back from a commercial. They zoomed into the middle of Broadway in Nashville, where they could have had their street race. That was the original plan. Mm-hmm. And instead, they just zoom and pan over like 50 miles out to where the actual race was actually being held. And I'm just like, you guys are not supposed to tear the Band-Aid off like this. You're meant to at least give the impression that you're close to Broadway.
It's part of the metro area. Dude, Thermal Club is further out from Los Angeles than this.
But you're not supposed to show how the sausage is made. Come on. Sorry,
no. We have a new way of expressing this per the great Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, Mike Tomlin. And I quote, "I can't give you all the ingredients to the hot dog. You might not like it."
I'm gonna have to use that from now on instead of how the sausage is made. That's actually pretty good.
This is deeply irrelevant in the era of Boar's Head fucking up all their meats over in the U.S.
Oh boy, that's brutal. Also, I did kind of want to call a small audible here as I keep it 101. Does anybody watch the final episode of the Grand Tour yet? Because I know I did last week when it came out.
On my list. It's queued up for tonight.
So, Dre, you've done analyses of the Grand Tour, Top Gear after the reboot, now this. What'd you make of it?
I'll try my best to keep it spoiler free, because out of respect to you two, because you haven't actually seen it yet. It's pretty good. I'd actually call it very good. It completely leans into that this is a nostalgia trip more than anything else. If you ever watched the last episode of Clarkson, Hammond and May on BBC Top Gear, it has a lot of very similar tones where where we're just leaning into the fact we're doing a lot of our old stuff all over again. If you've been a fan of these guys for a long time, there is a lot of Leonardo DiCaprio leans up and points at the screen moment saying, hey, I know this one. And that's fine. Honestly, I wouldn't expect the final episode between them to be any other way. I think I can give this bit away at least. The three hosts are completely into we don't care if we offend anybody, which there is a couple of below the belt jokes in there that, it's
I would
very...
expect, if those three are signing off, I would expect nothing less than an international racist incident.
They come pretty close. You'll find,
yeah.
You'll know when you watch it.
In a sick, sort of twisted way, I'd kind of be disappointed if they didn't. And it's like, oh yeah, these are how these guys are when they're in their private lives.
I'll tell you the small premise. They go to Zimbabwe. And basically they bring, Andy Willman wanted them to basically test the range of a bunch of electric cars. The boys were like, we're going to ignore him and we're just going to go to Zimbabwe in 3 cars that we always wanted to own. James May brings a Triumph Stag. Amazingly, without the Rover V8 engine swapped into it, like most Triumph Stags did back in the day, because, Rover V8, etc., was the better V8 rather than the British Leyland bullshit of the time. Richard Hammond brings a Ford Capri. Not the GT, the GXL, because he thinks it's the better one.
Of course he does.
He gets the shit taken out of him for that a lot of the time. And Clarkson brings a Lancia Monte Carlo. Apparently he paid 80 grand of his own money for that final shoot.
Does that Monte Carlo still have the brake servo installed?
Yes.
And he lived.
Apparently.
It didn't seem like there was an in memoriam slide at the end of the show, was there?
No, there wasn't. That I can confirm. And they drive 1,200 miles across east to west of Zimbabwe. As mentioned, there is a bunch of throwbacks in there to some of their old famous adventures and stuff. They talk a lot about their previous adventures as well in there. Like Vietnam comes up an awful lot, and it is one of my all-time favorites. The Vietnam one is very, very good, and it's mentioned a fair amount. And I'll let this in as a minor spoiler for those who know their geography. Zimbabwe is directly east of Botswana, and towards
I do know what they find.
That
has been spoiled for me previously. And
it
legitimately brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah, and they decide that towards the end of the trip, we're going to go to the Makati Kadi and Fubu Island, where they started their very first big foreign special, the Botswana special, from 17 years ago. They decide we're going to finish basically where we started. So they drive into Botswana, and I'll let because Cam mentioned it, I'll mention the spoiler. When they got to the Makati Kadi, they actually found the Lancia Beta Coupe and Mercedes E-Class that they used in that original special. Somebody had taken those cars back 1,000 miles back across the Makati Kadi through the salt plans and put it back where they started and restored the original doors. It was
my biggest shock is that the Mercedes had not sunken beneath the surface of the earth.
Yeah, they actually found them and restored them to something near what they had before. It's a very genuine.
Poor Lancia. Lived such a hard life.
You could still see the old paint marks of Light Bite on the side of it from 17 years ago. If you have not seen it, it's a decent special, but the final 30 minutes are pretty incredible. And it sums up how I feel about the Grand Tour in general, that when they put their heart to it and they were really trying, they can still produce some very magical, very special moments. And the best parts of the Grand Tour was when it wasn't them reading off a script. And you could not have scripted Clarkson's reaction to finding out that he'd seen his old car again. And I won't give away exactly what happens at the very, very end, but what I will say is props to the BBC. They didn't have to do what they did to let them play out the end of that special. If you are any way a Top Gear fan or a Clarkson Hammond and May fan from the Grand Tour, it's absolutely worth the watch, is what I will say. Get in touch if you watched it and let me know how you feel about it. I did actually review it on the website as well, and I talked a lot about the end of their show in general, so I feel like I kind of had to talk about the end of, for me, not only the end of an era, but also maybe the end of a genre in general, because you look back at what they've left behind and, well, what's left? The Grand Tour will continue with new hosts and a new production company, but we all know, and take it from me, I know exactly how this feels. Replacing beloved presenters in an organization never goes well. Just trust me on that one. And if anyone asks, ask how WTF1's doing right now. And alongside that, BBC Top Gear is on life support, if not already dead.
It's pretty much over at this point. I believe Chris Harris went on some small-time independent podcast hosted by a comedian and actor to say that it's done.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but, the circumstances leading to it, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, yes, I'll rip the Band-Aid off here. I personally am quite disappointed that Chris Harris, as a black man, went on the podcast of a man who had over 100 episodes taken down for numerous mentions of the N-word, to explain his side of what happened with Top Gear. Harris got to say his piece. I did actually listen to that part of his interview talking about it, and he basically confirmed a lot of what we already knew about the situation with the BBC. Yes, they were watching the Grand Tour. Yes, they were very much... like Harris gives them their flowers. He said, look, we were trying to chase them because we knew their stuff was still so good. We were actively trying to follow in their footsteps. For what it's worth, I said it before in this podcast, I very much enjoyed the Matt LeBlanc, Harris, Chris Reed, Roy Reed, Matt LeBlanc era of the show before they got rid of Reed, and he's doing great work with Auto Trader on their YouTube channel right now.
Roy Reed does not need any of these problems as time has gone on.
Yeah, and he's now hosting Fifth Gear now as well with Jason Platum and Vicky Butler Henderson. That's a throwback for you in its own right, which I thought was quite funny. But
so they're the last ones left,
basically. Yeah, and their show is still going, and a new series just started this past week, believe it or not. And Harris confirmed a lot of what we already knew. They were desperate for ratings. They moved the show to BBC One for that reason. They were chasing the Grand Tour. They were jealous of their success. They actively hired Patrick McGuinness and Freddie Flintoff, who were great personalities, but not professional drivers. And look how well that turned out. McGuinness crashed a Lambo, and then they nearly killed Freddie via that stunt. And Harris felt horribly guilty about the fact that he didn't warn Flintoff about what was coming. Apparently the BBC and Flintoff have settled out of court. Apparently it was a £9 million compensation check to Freddie to make up for the fact he nearly died. And if you're a cricket fan and you know what he looks like now, you can tell he's had plastic surgery to recover some of the facial lacerations that he suffered as a result of that incident. He basically said, if it wasn't for the fact that Freddie is such a freak athlete, because for those who don't know, he was a former brilliant professional cricketer, pretty much, what was a national hero when he won the Ashes in 2005 with England. If it wasn't for that, he would have been dead. So, says a lot really about the situation. It's worth listening to, even if I'm disappointed that Harris was placating that fucker. But, it's worth a listen. But, we've talked a little bit enough about that as a Keeping It 101.
Actually, back to the subject at hand.
Alex Palou is a three-time IndyCar Series champion, and it happened in Nashville in a race where he and Will Power weren't really a factor in it. But trust us, it's good. Well, let's start from the start of the weekend. Alex Palou comes in with a 33-point lead and as many as 54 points available, but in practice, only 49 points available for him to make up. Because remember, you get 5 points just for starting your engine. You get 51 for winning the race. 1 bonus point's baked in when you lead a lap because lead a lap. Then you have 2 bonus points for leading the most laps and a point for pole. Anyway, Will Power basically needs a lot of help to win this race and the championship. Because even if he wins, Alex Palou can still clinch it with the 9th place finish. But, Will Power qualified 4th. Alex Palou has an engine penalty. And on top of that, he doesn't qualify well. So he's got to start 24th. Maybe you think there's a miracle in hand. And then, 15 laps in, Will Power's seatbelt harness breaks. He does the right thing and he comes in. But that's championship over before it even steeps in the water.
Yeah. Yes, this is the championship decider that never really happened. And in fact, that seatbelt buckle, the lap belt buckle, continued to have issues, actually popped itself open again later in the race. The mechanical failure giveth, the mechanical failure taketh away.
This is more of an anticlimax than when Alexander Rossi checked up back into the back of Marco Andretti at the start of the Sonoma race.
Oh man. That's a throwback. But Power loses the 5 laps, and realistically,
that's it.
He really needed to win this to have a good shot at it. Mm-hmm. And it was far from that.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Skill issue.
This whole meme about how Alex Palou has the best luck in avoiding accents. For one, that's partially a skill. It's not all down to luck. Yes, some of it is luck, but some of that is skill.
It is, RJ.
The meme is also just oh, good luck with your seatbelt problems and your crashes. I simply choose not to have this issue.
It is funny, actually, because there was a clip played during the NBC broadcast of how many crashes that Alex Palou has been directly behind and completely uninvolved in. And there's 5 or 6 crashes.
There's 5 or 6 where Palou is directly in shot as the crash is happening, and he avoids trouble every single damn time. It's ridiculous how often this kept coming up. And Palou was only really directly affected in one crash all season that was off somebody else, and that was Joseph Newgarden in Detroit. That was about it. All the other ones, he's gone out of his own way, except for Iowa. And it's a shame. I feel sorry for Will. That's a shit way to go out in that sense. It's one of those ones where I would have liked to have seen it played out in track. I think Penske clearly did have a good package for this race. They normally do on these. I'm not sure I'd call Nashville the Superspeedway by
smaller
nature,
than Indy ovals.
Smaller than Indy, about the same size as Texas. It's
an intermediate track, but it's definitely not a cookie cutter track.
No,
as we
it's
call
got
it in
its
the
own
NASCAR
charm. The fact that it's a little bit smaller and it's a concrete surface gives it a little bit of character. I mean, people were saying like turn 4 had too much character because there is a very nasty bump in the middle of that corner, and it was wreaking havoc on people's suspensions. In practice, ask Nolan Siegel. And after qualifying, ask pole sitter Kyle Kirkwood. But you wouldn't be able to tell in the early stage of the race because Kyle Kirkwood looked at some points like he was going to win the darn thing.
Yeah, it's wild in that sense. Yeah, I feel sorry for Will. That's a shit way to go out and lose a title like that. Of all things, a seatbelt buckle. That's
Will
a
Power
unicorn.
has had like awful ways to lose championships throughout his career. And that's just even before he won the first time in 2014.
And look, this was always going to be a long shot. I mean, 33 points. You don't normally take that kind of championship lead out of people in one race.
No.
IndyCar's point structure by design is designed for you to specifically not to do that. So it was always going to be a moonshot for Power to try and win this back. But the fact it was just taken out of him within 20 laps of the race even started. It was an unfortunate blow on that one, and it kind of just deflated the whole sort of, this is the championship decider kind of. I mean, we already had Scott McLaughlin be eliminated after many attempts of trying to murder Alex Palou in the week leading up to this race via
Pufferfish, neurotoxin, man. Really? That's below the belt.
Bikes sort of courtesy of Graham Rahal in his dealership. Skydiving, yeah.
Walked in the porta potty.
Yeah, he tried that one too. None of which was successful. So he was eliminated from contention the moment that race started. And then for Will to just go out after 20 laps was just unfortunate, really, more than anything else. And it's a shame because Will has been, Will's been excellent. His speed has more than come back this year, and that's the one big takeaway I can take from Will Power's 2024 is that I was worried about him after the end of last year, whether how much of it was obviously the horrible staph infection that his wife Liz suffered last year that nearly killed her, that would do a number on any reasonable person when their loved one is going through something so horrific. I wondered whether that was the main reason he struggled last year, whether it was maybe just genuine decline for a man who was entering his age 43 season. But no, this year he's been exceptional, and he's been the consistent Penske big hitter pretty much all year long. They amazingly, as a team, they still got 8 wins on the year, nearly half, which is classic Penske. But
They were split between all 3 of their drivers, and there was
almost
big
evenly
spells, almost evenly, and there was big spells in between where those drivers were doing nothing good.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what ultimately cost Power a genuine shot at this title. There was that rough patch towards the end of the year, like in Iowa and in Gateway, where he just had bad drives, and there was
Gateway. He got airborne. Indy was a big. That was brutal on his chances, and of course, remember, he got the 10 points taken away for St. Pete.
But he also got 8 back because he gained 2 spots from his 2 teammates' disqualifications. So really, he only lost 2 that weekend.
Crazy. Yeah. I think
and to that effect,
it proved that Will Power has not fallen off. Which is crazy considering this was the first year since he joined Penske that he didn't win a pole position.
Yeah, but he's already got 70 of them. But yeah, it's wild to say that. I mean, we've got to talk a little bit about the race winner because very quietly we've barely mentioned that Colton Herta actually won this race, his first oval victory. He beat Pato O'Ward in a straight shootout right at the end of the race as Pato was turning it into
book it. Scotty nominee.
Golden Melon
Scotty favorite, I might
Let's lay out the scene here. Marcus Ericsson's kind of It's been a rough year for Marcus Ericsson. He hits the wall, and the race restarts with about 60 to go, just in the window for like maybe you can make it on one more tank of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Pato O'Ward comes in with about 45 laps to go. He pits from fifth place. Colton Herta is leading at the time. He'd gotten past David Malukas, and Pato O'Ward came in the pits. But actually, O'Ward was leading at the time. Herta second, Malukas third. Those three look like they're going to be the contenders for the win. 20 laps later, Herta comes in, not wanting to take any chances, so it pretty much just leaves David Malukas to try and run it out, see if he could finish this on one more tank. He cannot. And just as Malukas dives in the pits, both Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward, who are pretty much running tail to nose, come up to the side of Stingray Rob, who is about to be a lap down and has his own interesting fight to deal with, the fight for the last leader circle spot. Herta goes to the inside of Rob. O'Ward goes to the outside. O'Ward stays ahead of him as they head down the backstretch, but not for long because Colton Herta, with that momentum, sends it up the inside of turn 3, goes on to take the lead of the race, and goes on to take an overdue first oval win.
Sensational. Well, that was the best pass in IndyCar this year. We got a Ricardo Zonta moment on an oval in IndyCar with less than 10 laps to go. Incredible bravery from Colton Herta because it opened up the angle just to keep it going down the inside and slam it down the inside of Pato O'Ward's face. And, pardon me, we all know Pato O'Ward is arguably the best oval racer in IndyCar. He's certainly in that conversation. He's top 2, and you could argue he's maybe not 2 between him and Joseph. And to beat him like that straight up, this was playing exactly into Pato O'Ward's hands with that earlier stop in the green. Pato was destined to win this race until all of a sudden he wasn't. And next thing you know, Colton's in front, leads comfortably, and takes the win. And look, I'm really happy that this was a year that Scott McLaughlin got his first oval win because that had been due for a good couple of years now. Yeah. And that Colton Herta got his first oval win because that's been overdue. Because his oval improvement this year has been tremendous.
He finished in the top 5 in 4 of the last 6 oval races, and it could have been more. It could have been a lot more. Remember, he qualified second at the 2021 Indy 500?
The speed ain't been the problem.
So he's had the aptitude for this discipline of racing. It's just the result wasn't there yet until then.
He didn't even have a podium on an oval until the second race at Milwaukee, which is just wild for a guy that's in year 5 of his IndyCar career.
Because usually he's running up there, sometimes even leading, and then, how does the meme go? Oh boy, I can't wait to win this race with my speed and dominating strategy.
Boy, F you!
And in this case...
Let's not forget, he spun out from second in the Indy 500 earlier this season.
Entirely of his own volition.
How much would he have loved to have taken those 40-plus points back? He would have won him the championship.
As if he finished just 29 points behind in the end. His best ever result in the championship.
Geez, he would have liked the points from the first race in Milwaukee where he was having a great day and then he left the pits with 3 wheels on his wagon.
There was better execution, and Colton Herta leaves with the championship and maybe even a double. Because he was in contention for the Indy 500 as well. It's amazing.
I don't know. That Penske fleet, man. That Penske fleet was scary. But on the topic of execution, Alex Palou, 3-time Astor Cup winner.
Yeah, dude.
Wow.
And this was, of course, another race that proves it. Just like, Alex Palou can't do ovals, where I've always said, like, Alex Palou's great weakness is that, his oval pace attribute is like a 90 instead of a 95 or 97 compared to, like, Joseph Newgarden or Pato O'Ward. But, like, he didn't have
that and, like, this race, he got trapped a lap down early with the way the first caution played out. And then tried an audacious fuel-saving strategy because, well, fuck it, he had nothing to lose. He had already won the championship. Why not go for the win on a Hail Mary? And he ended up 11th out of it. Feels good. Feels real good.
This was obviously not as good as last season because, like, the kind of stuff that happened, that just wasn't sustainable. That was really good, but that wasn't sustainable. This was more sustainable, but once again, he's clearly the most consistent driver out of the whole bunch.
It's simple to me, and I'm going through all the numbers and advanced stats as I put my season review together. I've not quite gotten to part 3 yet with Alex Palou, but my gut says to me, I think this was the first year in IndyCar since CART back in 2001 where no one was able to avoid at least having one bad day. Everybody had at least one finish outside of the top 20 all year long. This, including Palou, he was one of them too after what happened in Iowa. Now, to me, this was a championship this year that was defined by mitigating mistakes. No one in the field won more than 3 races this year. This was very much like Palou's first title back in 2021, where there was no outstanding team or car. Penske, yes, did win nearly half the races out of the 17. Penske won 8 of them this year, but they were spread out, as we mentioned. Nobody won more than 3. McLaughlin had the most, and McLaughlin actually had 5 pole positions as well this year, more than anybody comfortably. But they were spread out. There were 7 different winners, and that's actually quite low for an IndyCar season. There was a concentration at the top, but there was a lot of people that had at least 2 bad days.
Trey, I can't remember a year in recent memory where I've seen Penske be so good on their good days and just trip over themselves so hard on their bad days where there was probably another 2 or 3 wins in it for them.
Absolutely.
If the Penske's didn't either cheat, there was that one time, but also
that's literally one win that got away.
One win that got away. They literally cheated, but also there was a couple instances where they actually hit each other.
Yeah,
Toronto comes to mind straight the hell away.
Laguna Seca as well,
and just. They, in terms of raw speed, this field feels very much like a return to Penske's form, but they executed like hot garbage far too often this year. They'll live with it because they won the Indy 500.
Yeah.
But unideal. Not ideal across a season.
I think there are permutations and ways where 7, maybe 8 different dudes could have won this championship if they had executed perfectly. I'd have thrown all 3 Penskes in there. I'd have thrown Scott Dixon in there. I'd have thrown Pato O'Ward and maybe even Kyle Kirkwood in that conversation as well. There were 7 or 8 dudes. There was a clear top echelon in IndyCar this year, and they all tripped over each other. This was a death by 1,000 cuts kind of IndyCar season. This was never, like, as RJ alluded to, Alex Palou had one of the best IndyCar seasons of all time last year. Like, not just in terms of number of wins. He only had 5, but even then he had an average finish of 3.7 last year. That was never going to happen again. Like,
remember what we mentioned on our F1 episode of we just watched Max Verstappen have the single greatest statistical season by a driver ever. And we had to actually sit there and really think about, but was he driver of the year? Because Alex Palou was that good in 2023.
Yeah. And that was never going to be sustainable. That was never going to happen again. IndyCar is far too random. It's far too competitive under normal circumstances for that to be replicated.
And this year, what I would say as well is I feel like these engines have nothing left. They have nothing left to give out of this formula because both Chevy and Honda were blowing through engines at a ridiculous rate. I mean, Palou's engine, he started this race with an engine penalty. It lasted 2 races. That thing went in for the first race in Milwaukee. And that kind of, the consistency at which people were getting engine penalties was then jumbling up grids.
We had 5 or 6 in this final race. Yeah, we had 5 or 6 in this final race. Rossi, McLaughlin, Palou, Ferrucci, all of them were going through engine penalties during the last race.
Engine penalties, tail as old as time.
We were getting them 4 or 5 races ago, though.
Yeah, that was very much a real thing. Look, the way I see it, this was a death of 1,000 cuts kind of IndyCar season. This was a season where consistency mattered more than anything else, even more than it normally does, because of how many contenders there were, how many top-tier drivers were involved in it, and how many of them tripped over themselves trying to chase down Alex Palou. Palou, once he got past the month of May and got a couple of wins down, he led this championship, and then he just did not let it go. He was ruthless, and every time somebody got close, he would get another big result. The rest of the field would trip over themselves, and he would push it back out to around 50 points again. It only got tight really at the end, and even then, Palou...
Courtesy of mechanical failure.
Mechanical failure, like Milwaukee race 2. That was a race that Power could have punished him badly, and it just didn't work out in the end. And hey, I'd argue Palou deserved that luck, because for me, he was still comfortably the best driver in IndyCar, even if the points didn't necessarily reflect that in the final standings. Palou is special. He is so special as a driver.
He took the points lead with a pole win at Laguna Seca and never gave it up for the rest of the year.
And that was the race that did it. That was your slide indoors moment, because that was the race where he just beat the field over his knee. Like not for the first time he's gone to Monterey and just absolutely obliterated the field. And that's exactly what he did at Laguna Seca. And after that, that was it. You couldn't touch him again for the rest of the season.
There was far too many of those moments we talked about with like Lewis and Max back in Sochi 2021, where one of his contenders has this crushing, dominating win. He looks over his shoulder. Like, what are you doing here? Because his floor is just too damn high. In that Portland weekend where Will Power he turned back the clock. Boots to asses, all race, all weekend. And Palou shadowed him the whole way home in second.
What's up? Yeah. What's good?
His floor is too high. Even this year, with the crash of his own volition in Iowa, first crash that he made on his own in a long time.
Yeah,
2 years.
2 years. And with the mechanical failure in Milwaukee race 2, I had this shirt on. I was in the stands. I entered all 5 stages of grief in about under 30 seconds.
And then we're just like, you get me back to that place where I can drink that root beer, because that's the only thing that will make me even remotely happy in this instance.
I finished that night off with some spicy chorizo poutine. It was breathtaking. It was the only good thing in my life that day. But beyond that, and beyond this Hail Mary attempt with the fuel, he just wouldn't finish lower than 8th.
No,
he wouldn't finish lower than 5th.
Yeah, I went through the whole results table. I counted all 4 times where Alex Palou finished below 5th place, and they were the Detroit race where he was crashed into, the Iowa race where he crashed of his own volition, the Milwaukee race where his battery died before the race, and Nashville where he got trapped the lap down, tried the strategy, and it didn't work.
He was playing with house money, though. It's like, well, why not just gamble on fuel and see where it gets me?
So in other words, only once did Alex Palou have all the cards in his hand and didn't finish inside the top 5.
And the second time the title was already over when the time it came to execute the strategy. He was already champion by that point. It was house money.
Yeah, I mean, he always has the answers. And even this year at the 500, where for the first time in years, Ganassi were soundly beaten for speed at the 500. He still turned it into a good day after Ganassi had a pretty poor month of May by their standards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He won the road course race.
In punishing fashion.
Yeah.
He's got 2, it's not even not enough bad days. He's got too many great days where he will just pull all but a podium out of a weekend.
I crunched the numbers. Alex Palou led the most laps on a road or street course 3 times this year, more than any other driver. And of course, he led more laps on road and street courses than any other driver in the field. It was a little closer this year, but he was still on top.
And he converted that into 36 more points than any other driver on road and street courses this season. Will Power was second, and Colton Herta was third on that list. Yeah, that's just it. It was a season of mitigating mistakes and mitigating errors, and Alex Palou made the least amount of errors than anybody else, and he backed that up with a couple of big wins, and just unrelenting consistency, suffocating consistency. No matter what the sport threw at him until the very end of the season, you could throw the house at him. It's like that old phrase when Andy Roddick was beaten at Wimbledon by Roger Federer, and then the first thing he says on the microphone is, "Well, I threw the house at Roger Federer, but he went into the back and got his tub." And that's what Alex Palou was pretty much all season. It was no matter what the sport threw at him, he'd find out.
If the question is execution, there is no one else I want in my seat than Alex Palou.
Townsend Bell made that point. He's one of his cringy nicknames, the professor of execution or whatever the hell.
Very much trying to make him the Alain Prost of this sport, which I guess in the way he drives, it makes sense.
I just if you need a win, most of the time I'll go get you a win. And if you need a top 5, damn it, I will get you that top 5.
Yeah, that's just what it was. Look, it's hard to win a goddamn race in IndyCar. You've got to be absolutely incredible for one day to win an IndyCar race. And there are a lot of dudes who could have done that this year. Scott McLaughlin, Joseph Newgarden, Will Power, Pato O'Ward, the Colton Herta. We had 7 actually, multiple race winners in IndyCar this year, 7 of them. And yet Alex Palou still won with basically a race in hand. He was incredible, and we'll talk about it more. I'm gonna plan a season review podcast in a couple of weeks' time, probably not next week because we're a bit busy with MotoGP coming up this weekend at Misano 2, the Emilia Romagna edition, the regional version I like to call it, and obviously Formula 1 at Singapore. But in a couple of weeks' time, when F1 slows down, we're definitely going to do an IndyCar season review and talk a lot about that in even greater detail. I also wanted to mention a couple of things before we get out of here. Salute to NBC, because this was their final race weekend with IndyCar under their coverage. They've been covering them for best part of 20 years. We all know the series is heading to Fox next year, IndyCar and Indy Next with that. And it didn't really hit home that it was their final race weekend until they played their leaving montage at the end. And we heard Lee Diffie's voice one last time covering the series, and it was a beautiful, fitting farewell and a love letter to what makes IndyCar so great at times. It was beautifully done. It's been all over their social media. I do recommend going out of your way to find it. It's well worth the 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, Lee hit just about every note during that outro, and I mean, it's Lee Diffie. I would expect nothing less. He's already been a 10 over in NASCAR.
He's been incredible over there.
Yeah, it's best commentator we've had in a while over in NASCAR. And I mean, I'll say it, when they played over Dan Weldon and Justin Wilson, I was bawling like a little kid.
They hit on so many great. Listen, I think what made it so great for me was the elements of what makes IndyCar so great. They hit every note in that regards. The fans, the traditions, the tracks they go to, the drivers. They gave so many flowers out to stars of old and new. Like Dario Franchitti was mentioned, Scott Dixon was mentioned, Will Power was mentioned, but also the current crop of. I think they might have edited 2 endings just in case Will Power had won the title. But Alex Palou's winning his 3rd title was mentioned in there, as you do as an editor. It's like F1 in 07 when they had to, oh shit, Kimi Raikkonen actually won the title. Quick, put Kimi celebrating in at the end before Hamilton was going to win the title. Damn it. That sort of last minute edit change. But like, you know,
the presses, get me rewrite.
But they also mentioned their own crew, James Hinchcliffe and Connor Daly, kind of becoming broadcasters in their own right. The recovery of Robert Wickens, was so lucky he's still here with us. Obviously, the tragic passings of Justin Wilson and Dan Lyon-Hartwell, and of course, were mentioned in there with Look, Lee Diffie is the best commentator working in North America today, maybe the best in the world when it comes to motorsport coverage. He is so brilliant at hitting the right tone, the right note, the right amount of energy at the right time. No one in the world of motorsport does it better than him. And I love that even NASCAR acknowledged that, because they've already put together a montage of the ends of the last 4 races he's called. And they are all amazing calls, including mentioning Marcus Ambrose. I think Marcus Ambrose's SVG and Chris Buescher are fighting out at the Glen. Incredible.
That's a supercars experience talking. Like, in recent years, you could probably say, like, what was the worst part of NBC's coverage? Like, commentators are forcing cringy nicknames, or commentators are bickering at one another because of agendas, or they're showing too many gratuitous replays of crashes. It's just like, if that's the worst it gets, they've probably done a really good job.
Yeah, I love that Jenna Fryer summed it up best on Twitter, who writes for the Associated Press. They even made Paul Tracy tolerable. And I'm like, God, Paul Tracy's just catching strays. I'm just like, because if there is not a pot that Jenna Fryer will not spin at certain points to generate controversy, including tagging Paul directly a week after he had a horrible accident. Jenna Fryer, my God.
No mercy.
Yeah. And like I agree with RJ entirely. If you're going to be completely honest with ourselves, yeah, Townsend Bell and the cringy nicknames, some of the conflicts of interest that were in regards to that were not great. Some of the graphical decisions were not great towards the end of it, their time in the hybrid decisions.
That first weekend with the hybrid system was hilarious.
Green, red. Oh my God, this was so
yeah, but that's the thing Fox has got to figure out too.
Yeah.
Guys, this is not LMP1H. It doesn't work like that.
No.
Great play-by-play will never go out of style.
Vip's PowerPoint says that in the chat.
Oh, God.
But that's just like, we're trying to like drill for like isolated incidents and like a 15-year tenure that goes all the way back to NBC Sports Network's predecessor, the predecessor of a network that is dead.
Versus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Generally speaking, the good has more than outweighed the shaky, the cringe, or the bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was at a period, where they picked it up where IndyCar was in a bad way. We talk about IndyCar and their questionable decisions now. They're a world away from where they were at that time.
They just reunified by way of buying up the assets of the rival, but even then, it still wasn't great. And that also want to bring me to like another point on this. I hope the general feeling of malaise around IndyCar in recent years and recent months doesn't reflect negatively on Alex Palou. It really should not, because as time has gone on, people still put out the thing. It was like, yeah, Sebastian Bourdais won 4 championships, but he beat a bunch of plumbers and insurance salesmen. No, it wasn't like that. He was simply the best driver on his side of the split. And as time has gone on, the people that he raced against, their resumes only got better and better. And when you look at the competition, obviously it shouldn't. I just hope it doesn't affect negative, because it's not Alex Palou's fault that Mark Miles is not good at PR, or that Honda has 1 foot up in something.
And if there's one thing that I'm not going to come at IndyCar for, it is the level of talent behind the wheel, because, I mean, Alex Palou has walked into Chip Ganassi Racing and made it his home. He has torn it from Scott Dixon's hands.
3 titles.
No one else got to do that since Dario Franchitti, the last back-to-back champion, also in the 10 car. That was over a decade ago. Everyone else that plugged into the 10 since then was picked up and put down by Scott Dixon.
Yeah. Tony Kanaan, Felix Rosenquist, Ed Jones, they tried for a long time to replicate what Dario brought to that team, and they couldn't do it until Alex Palou came along. Look, I completely agree with RJ's sentiment. Yes, there's been genuine and big issues with IndyCar, and this is, I stand by this, this has not been a good year for the series in terms of how they've conducted themselves on and off the track. I think action-wise, it was still pretty good. Off it, it's been a hot mess all year long. That should
I'm raking the series over the coal in our season review.
Oh, yeah. And look, on that, none of that is Alex Palou's fault or problem, and it's got nothing to do with how brilliant a race car driver he has been. This has been, in my opinion, the strongest IndyCar field I can remember in the 10 years I've been watching, and he still came out on top. Ganassi only won 3 races all year, and he still came out on top against the Penske juggernaut and one of their strongest teams since the 4-car days when it was Simon Pagenaud and the still good Helio Castroneves in the same camp. Like, Alex Palou is on a generational level run here to win 3 Astor Cups against this field. Like, I've said it before, you've got a guy in the field right now that is arguably the greatest IndyCar driver of all time, and Joseph Newgarden, who is well on the way to replicating that in his own right, who has more wins than Rick Mears does in this series right now. And he's crushed Newgarden 2 years running. And that's no disrespect to Newgarden, who is an all-time great in IndyCar, with 2 titles, a bunch of runner-up finishes, and now 2 Indianapolis 500 wins to go alongside him. Dixon has got 6 Astor Cups in his own right. He's crushed these dudes. He's beaten them pillar to post.
It's, again, one of the strongest fields that you'll find anywhere, really through most of these teams. I mean, there are some great drivers stuck in some pretty bad teams right now. Hashtag Lundgaard is free.
Christian Lundgaard, Alex Rossi, David Malukas, Graham Rahals had great seasons in his own right. Let's give him his flowers.
Look at McLaren. We've talked about it this year. Are McLaren good, or does Pato O'Ward drive for them?
Pato O'Ward is just that good. Pato O'Ward is exceptional. Colton Herta is exceptional. Carl Kirkwood was exceptional this year. Even Marcus Ericsson wasn't as bad as his overall results, quite frankly, showed. I'll get to that in the season review in a couple of weeks' time. No, trust me on this one. I've looked at the numbers. He was not as bad as the stats suggest.
Well, let's save it for some of this, but yeah, Alex Palou.
He's incredible. He's him. He's just him. He's the best IndyCar driver I've seen in the 10 years I've been watching this sport, and some of the sport's greatest ever.
Hopped into a prototype for the first time this year and was kicking ass at Daytona.
That's the thing. Like if this segment of single-seater racing just completely disappeared, you could probably drop him into something else and he'd still do well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything that he's driven in, he has been phenomenal. Super Formula, IndyCar, IMSA GTP. He's top echelon in all of them. There is but one crown jewel left that he does not have. And maybe if Ganassi can refine some of that May magic and he doesn't take Arenas VK to the brain. Ooh. Maybe.
Yeah, more on that.
There's one oval that Alex is really good around. He hasn't won there yet, though.
And that's the 500. And I think that one's coming. Like, put it this way. If you had to
pick an oval to be good at in IndyCar, you'd probably pick Indianapolis.
I stand hand over heart and think, even if Alex Palou were to dip for a couple of years, do F1, get processed, and then come back with his tail tucked between his legs, he could still add more to this.
No, he's not done.
He's absolutely can add more to this. Like he only just turned 27. He's got 15 more years of this if he wants it.
Yeah.
And another, kind of moving storyline with this is actually Ganassi has begun their downsizing in response to the charter system. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think that could be a good thing for them.
Yeah.
Going down from the 5 to the 3 cars. I actually think that would create a leaner, more focused team, because actually expanding out to 5, Ganassi was not near as strong this year as they were the last couple.
Only won 3 races. Their floor dropped out entirely this year. Marcus Ericsson was a great floor guy to have in that camp. Kiffin Simpson, Marcus Armstrong, and Linus Lundqvist were not that. There's no getting around it. They were
flashes with the latter two.
There were flashes, but overall they were relatively poor compared to Marcus, who you knew was a top 6 guy. And that unfortunately just did not happen with their also rans this year. We'll see what happens. I mean, they are ultimately going to turn the extra resources into an Indy Next team next year. So we'll see how that plays out. Having a more secure pathway, a technical alliance now with Meyer Shank Racing is going to be interesting.
Huge for Shank.
That team. Huge for Shank. So we might see one of their drivers over there next year as well. But we'll talk about all of that in more detail in our season review in a couple of weeks' time. All we can really say is Alex Palou is him. Now a 3-time Astor Cup champion, the first to retain the crown since Dario Franchitti a decade ago, and 3 in just 5 full seasons in the sport. What a terrifying prospect for the rest of the field, knowing that guy is around him. And hey, to close it out, Joseph Newgarden spoke about Alex Palou before. I thought it's only fitting that a former champion talks about Alex on and off the track. And he said this on his Instagram page, said, quote, "I will not forget this day back in April for multiple reasons. Alex Palou and I planned to trade our helmets earlier in the season during the Daytona 24. We forgot to do it. And this day, Friday of the Barber race weekend, Alex made sure to remind me that we had a helmet trade that was overdue. That reminder and the way he treated me on that specific day meant so much to me. Alex was one of the very few people to treat me exactly the same way he had always done before. When the world turns on you, you see people's true colors." Interesting statement given his year. "I have immense respect for Alex and his character. He's a good man, has a beautiful family, and works hard for everything he achieves. He's one of the very best in the world and continues to stay fair and humble. Congrats, 3-time champion. You have earned every bit of it. Super proud to share a racetrack with you." Because he's also a disgustingly nice guy on top of it. It's horrible. He gives us racing drivers a bad name. It's the fucking worst. We'll be back for an IndyCar season review in a couple of weeks' time. Places you can find us real quick: youtube.com/motorsport101, facebook.com/motorsport101, Twitter @DreHarrison101, @CBuckley917, @RJ O'Connell. Our podcast itself, motorsport_101, motorsport101 pod on Instagram, our website, motorsport101.com, and our Patreon page, patreon.com/motorsport101. If you want to follow us on there for early access content, Discord server access, all these recordings as well, you name it, it's all there. We're done. Thank you very much for watching and listening along. We will catch you guys next time for Formula One for the Singapore Grand Prix. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison, they've been Cameron Buckley and RJ O'Connell. Until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
Adios.
To get a pick right.